the number one word that we're all focused on is repeat rate, because that's going to drive ultimately the success of the business.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by PDQ, Pretty Damn Quick, and Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 143, and my guest is Michael Allan. Michael is a seasoned consumer executive with over 15 years of experience spanning retail, e-commerce, and strategy. His career is a great example of what it looks like to move from high-level strategy into hands-on execution. He started at Bain Company, where he spent years advising businesses before making the leap into operating roles, eventually leading major parts of the business at Rugs USA, and now serving as a general manager at Quince, one of the fastest-growing consumer brands out there. In this episode, we go deep on what it really takes to scale a modern consumer business, from mastering Amazon and multi-channel retail to navigating private equity ownership to building a data-driven organization that can move fast and make smart decisions. We also unpack Quince's unique model, how they deliver high-quality products at radically lower prices, and how they think about customer acquisition, retention, and even the role of AI in marketing today. If you're interested in how great operators think, how businesses actually scale behind the scenes, and what it takes to win in today's consumer landscape, this show is for you. I hope you'll enjoy it. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wow Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michael Allan. Michael is a consumer executive with 15 years experience in retail, e-commerce, and strategy. He started his career at Bain Company, where he advised Fortune 500 and private equity clients on growth strategy, operational efficiency, and M&A. He later served as VP of Marketplace at Rugs USA, leading distribution on retailer channels like Amazon, Wayfair, Walmart, and Target. There he helped support the company's transition from founder-led to private equity ownership and its sale to Francisco Partners. He currently serves as a general manager at Quince, where he oversees the bedding and rugs categories. He completed his undergraduate degree at the University of Texas and his MBA at Northwestern Kellogg. Michael, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. I know you've got a lot going on in your life these days. You have a great story, work for a great brand, but we get the show started the same way every time, getting that first story from our guests. Where were they brought up? How were they brought up? And how might that upbringing have suggested that you'd have the career that you've had?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up kind of all over, but mostly in Texas. If I reflect back on what got me originally interested in business and marketing, when I was in high school, I'd never thought that I wanted to do business. I was really interested in music, actually. And so I was in a garage band with a bunch of my closest friends. And, we would get to play in coffee shops and little tiny venues, but we wanted to play at a big venue. And at the same time, I had just volunteered for a week as a counselor at the Muscular Dystrophy Association summer camp. And so this is a wonderful experience where you get to help children that are affected by this very severe disease. And so they're typically in wheelchairs or requiring walking assistance. And so I wanted to see how I could help advance that mission. And so we said, let's create a music festival, both selfishly because we wanted to have a big audience to play for, and then importantly to help raise money for that cause. Ended up being a huge success. So we had 1,000 people attend the first year of the event. And then the next year we expanded it a lot and moved it to 3 stages and a lot more bands, and then had 2,000 people attend. So we had, tens of thousands of dollars raised for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I think I realized the band wasn't that good. I, love music, but I'm not the world's best guitar player, but did realize that we were really good at the marketing and event organizing side of things, and got me more down the path of working in business and working in marketing.
MDA is one of those charities and organizations that was so formidable in my early life. Like many of us of my age, we grew up with Jerry Lewis and the Jerry Lewis
Absolutely. Yeah.
MDA
The
telethon,
telethon. Yeah.
on Labor Day weekend, and it wasn't Labor Day in the end of the summer until that show was on. So that's a great story that you were involved with that. So as you developed, later in life, and is there any other one point that said, "Geez, I'm going to become a consultant. I'm going to be in the retail space," or was that just a happenstance?
Yeah, I think it was a bit happenstance. So I got into the retail space originally through airlines. So, and I guess I'll back up. Getting into consulting, I didn't know what I wanted to do coming out of undergrad. So consulting was a great way to kick the can down the road and learn some more generalist skills before I start to specialize. And, was always really impressed by the lifestyle and the intellectual side of problem solving that comes with consulting. But my first interest was really in airlines, and I loved the analytical complexity of it. I love that it's very operationally intense, but also it's a consumer business. But realized airlines are great for consultants, they're great for lawyers, but nobody ultimately makes a great return in that industry. It's a serially underperforming industry for the participants themselves. And that actually got me more interested in retail just because it was still within the consumer practice at Bain and gave me a chance to work with a bunch of really great retailers, really great consumer brands, and continue down that path to work in e-commerce.
Let's kick Bain a little bit here. So how long were you at Bain?
Including business school, I was there for 7 years. So I spent, 4 years before business school, and then obviously spent time at Kellogg, and then after that came back for about 18 months to the New York office, and yeah, I had a chance to work in a bunch of different locations. So I was in the Texas office, and then Singapore, and then in New York.
From a vertical perspective, you alluded to retail practice. Is that where you spent most of your time?
Yeah, as much as possible. The one exception was I did also spend a good bit of time in the private equity group, and that ultimately got me interested in e-commerce, actually, just because I did a diligence of an e-commerce business and then did a couple other diligences that touched on it. And it really lit things up for me just because you can move so much more quickly in e-commerce than in traditional retail.
How did you deal with, at least my perception of having consulted quite a bit, and then also, worked as a brand operator, where, in consulting, oftentimes, you're coming up with ideas, you're making suggestions, but you're not necessarily implementing. And you might also not be held as accountable for implementation and performance and results as if you were a general manager like you are today. Was that a challenge for you in the way you were thinking about your career?
Yeah, I think it's the most important challenge for anyone that's in consulting and thinking about what to do next, just because you have to build on what you learn from consulting, but you also have to unlearn a bit of it because really consulting is all about advising in the most rigorous way possible the most critical questions for a business. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay someone else to help advise it. But the problem is that that same rigor can slow you down when you need to make lots of decisions every day. And often you're better off making a good informed decision and then course correcting rather than machinating the issue too much and therefore moving too slowly.
What did you learn about the interaction with clients? And, I've been a client, and some have said to me, geez, he's tough. And I've dealt with other clients that, are tough. How do you deal with that? The personality differences, their focus might be different as the operator than you are as the consultant. How did you balance that?
I think the most important skill is listening and hearing people out on their perspective. So especially in my earlier years in consulting, I would come in with just a really strong point of view, and I'd think I've learned about this business for all of 5 minutes and I know the answer. And that's 100% the wrong way to think about it. It's much more you want to ground yourself in some data and then talk about that data with people that know a lot more than you. And that's usually the client. So the client's typically been there for a long time and has a really informed perspective. And if you hear them out on that, draw out that perspective, you'll get them on your side. But if you come in guns a blazing with that perspective without listening, then you're not going to have an advocate within the organization.
Your comment is very well taken and is seems like such an obvious way to conduct ourselves. But oftentimes, as the consultant, you're trying to make a name for yourself. You're trying to demonstrate that you can, in fact, add value. So there's this balance that you're talking about between the listening and the engaging and offering up, the ideas. So that's a really good takeaway. So you had this period of time at Bain, formidable, foundational in your career, and you decide perhaps it's time for something else. Did it come to you? Did you go seek it out? How did the Rugs USA role come about?
So it was very serendipitous. I did a diligence in the space and got introduced to Rugs USA through that diligence, and so got to know the business quite well. And just had an opportunity come up to help out the business, help it really make that transition from founder led to private equity owned. With that, I jumped into a role that was focused on Amazon initially. And so I knew nothing about Amazon, but that was just where they had the greatest need. Kind of jumped in, tried to learn as much as I could about what makes a business successful on Amazon. And for me, I really thought about, well, you have the Amazon flywheel, and famously Jeff Bezos really fleshed out that idea. But I wanted to think about, well, what's the brand flywheel within that Amazon flywheel? And what are the factors that make you successful there? And so tried to do the research there, apply the same consulting approach, and learned as much as I could through the first few months.
Transition and change are sometimes difficult for people. You were moving from consulting side to brand side, you were taking on a new job. How did that change and transition impact you, if at all?
I'll talk first just about some of the challenges. So I'd mentioned before about the unlearning the very rigorous thought process with decision making and figuring out how to get to a faster throughput of decisions. But a lot of the other learning was working with people that had different backgrounds. So consulting, it's superficially very diverse. You have people that look quite different from one another, but in terms of the way they think, it's very consistent. And that's what makes these firms successful, is because the team members are ultimately fungible. The difference, of course, when you work in industry is you're going to work with people that have very strong strengths in different areas, and you need to adapt to those different personality types and really draw out their strengths. But also appreciate they're not going to come from the same starting point on every element as maybe someone that's coming from your background in consulting.
How long were you at Rugs USA?
I was there about 5 years.
And when you got there, I think you said it was founder led, yes?
Yeah, so I joined so after the close of the transition or transaction, so it was acquired by Comvest Partners out of Florida. And then I joined somewhat soon after that closing, really when they were in the process of standing up all the new professionalization of the functions.
And was the founder still involved when you were there, or had they exited?
Yeah, so the founder continued and continues to be involved in the business. And so his role evolved a bit over time. And so he was initially full-time in the CEO role and then stepped back into a board role. He's now returned to a CEO role again.
So you've had a few different opportunities. We'll talk about Quince in a bit, where there's private equity involvement in a business. Anything you care to share about, the nuances of working in a private equity environment?
I think that people often give private equity ownership a bit of a bad rap just because they're certainly an intense group of people. But I think that they're just trying to do the right thing for the business, and everybody's incentives are aligned that they're trying to grow the top line, grow the bottom line, and they want to move as quickly as possible. And so I really tried to lean into the benefit of that, just in that there's an opportunity to make really quick decisions and to move quickly and pulling the business forward. But I think that in order to be successful in those kinds of roles, you really have to let your KPIs be the grounding for decision making and lead with that information when updating the board or when updating any private equity owner. I found that in comparison to consulting, where there's a little bit more of the idea of fiefdoms or people having really different things they're optimizing to. The great thing about private equity ownership is that everyone's optimizing to the same thing, and that they're all just trying to grow the business as quickly as possible. Maybe they disagree on the best way to do that, but ultimately everyone's has a single mission of trying to make for a successful transaction.
Interesting. While you were at Rugs, you came in, you said focused on Amazon. Your scope remit evolved over time. Let's run through that.
Yeah, so initially focused on Amazon. It was a very nascent channel, and the business was certainly subscale when I joined, but was able to just put the foundations in place off of what I understood to be the best practices on Amazon. Also realized I was wrong about a lot of things with that, and then course corrected. But that ended up being just very successful. A business seemed to grow exponentially on Amazon and moved up to being, probably the second biggest rug brand on Amazon after previously was much lower than that, probably around number 10. And just off of that, the board decided to promote me up to being the general manager for the division. And so division being a brand that Rugs USA owned or continues to own New Loom. And so that's the brand for the marketplace function. So Amazon, Walmart, Target, all the retail channels, and separate from their direct consumer business, rugsusa.com. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity to do my first true GM role, own the P&L across all those areas of the business.
Was that scary first opportunity to own the P&L?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the pressure you feel in having to hit your numbers and having to report out on, I missed by 10%, I beat by 7% on a monthly and quarterly basis. You really wake up in the morning thinking about, well, when I open up my daily sales report, what are the numbers going to be, and what can I do to move them? So I love the pressure, but also certainly felt it.
Right. That's one of the things that, I've talked a lot about with, folks that have worked in a brand and then moved into consulting. And I've done that to a large degree. And one of the things that I still miss, I have a financial background, very analytical. The one thing that I still miss, not being an operator necessarily day to day, is waking up in the morning, looking at the numbers, understanding the impact in the P&L. That's always what got me jazzed working on the brand side.
Absolutely. I mean, I always think about it like a machine or a clock where there's all the moving parts and you figure out how you tinker with one or the other to try and drive the performance that you want.
Yeah, it's the mad scientist, the recipe, making that
Absolutely.
chemical reaction. Static checkouts are costing you money. Every shopper sees the same offers and too many walk away. That's why Shopify's fastest growing brands use PDQ, Pretty Damn Quick, the checkout segmentation platform. PDQ personalizes the checkout experience by creating tailored flows for each customer segment, whether they're first-time buyers, high spenders, or returning VIPs. Their platform runs ongoing A/B tests, automatically sets the best performing experience, and keeps optimizing for higher conversion and AOV. The result? More completed checkouts, less abandonment, and millions in uplift. Discover your brand's optimal checkout with PDQ at prettydamnquick.com. All right, let's jump to your current role. Tell us about Quince.
Yeah. So Quince is a business built around a very simple value proposition. We want to deliver really high quality products at really low prices. And we do that in a large number of product categories. So the business started originally in selling cashmere sweaters and selling bedding, but now has expanded to a much broader set of products, everything from women's wear apparel, men's wear, home goods. We've also expanded into consumer packaged goods.
And it's such an interesting business. I've been in retail forever. I think I pride myself on knowing brands. Quince is large. You'll tell us what you can about the size and scope of the business. Some of it is public information anyway. You'll tell us about recent investment, but it's a brand that I didn't really have on my radar.
Yeah. And I think that's a little bit intentional. We really want the business to be built on customers having a great experience, coming back and buying again, and then hopefully telling their friends about it. And we found that that's the firmest ground that you can build a business on versus leading with PR, leading with media, just because when you have a great experience, you're going to be a good advocate for the business. And that's allowed us, I think, to grow in a much more consistently high rate as opposed to leaning on PR, leaning on media, which is very spiky and is also very difficult to control.
All right. And size of business that you can share?
What's been reported is the business is well over $1 billion in sales and continues to grow at an extremely high growth rate.
It's really amazing. Products I have not purchased yet, but products look great. Site looks great. One of the things, when we were chatting, you've tended, it sounds like, tended to be a build versus buy technology business. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to build a platform that can deliver on that mission. And so instead of leading on best of breed SaaS tools or leaning on products that are available in the market, we want to build something that's much more differentiated. So Best example of that would be the front end for the site. So we're completely off Shopify as a business, which whenever I tell people that, their minds are kind of blown that you would go through that intense level of work to build something custom. But it just gives us so much more control than using an off the shelf tool like Shopify.
Yeah, guilty as charged. When you told me that, I did a double take and said to myself, really, I didn't think that there were, too many folks out there today that were, going down that path. But look, everybody does what works best for them. You talk about being intentional about, growth of the business. How do you get the message out? What's the secret sauce of so many brands are, heavy into influencers and creator economy, and some are focused, so aggressively on Meta from a paid media perspective. How do you get the message out?
Yeah, so performance marketing is one critical pillar of the business, but it's not really the most important piece. The most important piece is for the customers that we do get in the door, do they have a great experience and do they come back? And so the number one word that we're all focused on is repeat rate, because that's going to drive ultimately the success of the business. So Quince as a business model doesn't make sense if you come and buy once. Quince makes a lot of sense as a business if you come by and purchase many times across multiple product categories. And so we think that as being the lifeblood of our marketing engine. We think about the new customer acquisition channels as being a broad portfolio. So there's nothing really unique about the portfolio of spend that we do across channel. What's much more unique is just the way that we try and target customers. And so we have a lot of opportunities to push different product categories. And so that certainly expands the aperture of or expands the scope of customers that we can target. But then separately, the economics when we're acquiring customers are a bit different just because we have a lot of shots on goal. So when you're in as many product categories as Quince is, even when we talk about the first transaction, there's a lot of opportunities to increase UPT and therefore average order value. That, of course, will help lift the ROAS, help reduce our customer acquisition cost.
Yeah, I've worked in a lot of multi-category businesses and multi-brand businesses over the course of my career. And, we were always very strategic and sensitive to trying to create the cross category buyer. Much like a multi channel buyer, cross channel buyers seemingly have a higher LTV, I would imagine. Can you talk about that a bit?
When we think about new product categories, we want to ground it in the mission of delivering affordable luxury to consumers, but it certainly has that benefit of expanding the customer lifetime value. And so we try and really dig into the data to understand what is the journey of customers across multiple categories and how can we further expand that journey. Often customers will come and maybe they buy a sheet set as their first product category, and often I'll talk to customers that have that experience. The next thing we need to do is get them to purchase other product categories. And if they're, have children, get them to buy kids and babies clothing as well. Or if they're moving into a new place, maybe they're looking into purchasing a couch or purchasing furniture. So we have a lot of opportunities to really expand the relationship with the customer and therefore expand the customer lifetime value.
This might be getting, too into the detail, but, have you been able to figure out comfortably, confidently, a particular category is a great category to acquire a customer and other categories are better as add-ons?
Speaking more in general, certainly the higher AOV categories or the higher ASP categories, so furniture, for example, there's of course a higher barrier to bringing in those customers. And so often we'll see the journey start with a lower price point item and then continue into the higher price point items. And that's just, of course, driven by just the trust that you have in the brand. So it's a lot easier to make that $50 purchase than make the $1,000 purchase. We've been blown away, though, that there are so many customers that are making those $1,000 purchases in furniture and rugs, which is one of the categories I manage.
Right. So you're a general manager of a particular category. So you have peers. Is that the structure? You have peers that are general managers of other product categories?
Exactly. So we have a handful of general managers in the business, and then we also have category managers, very similar roles. Both of them are responsible for overseeing a P&L. And that's typically for the category managers, maybe one department, and then for the general managers, two or three departments.
Customer acquisition costs, are one of the biggest challenges for brands. What are you seeing in the market, these days around customer acquisition costs, changes of such, and the channels that you've, started to perhaps integrate into capturing new customers?
Certainly, the customer acquisition costs in the market do appear to be increasing, and I think that that's just the overall message that everyone is certainly feeling in the marketing world. Where we're trying to lean against that is really by driving up ROAS through increasing AOV. So that's typically driven by UPT rather than, of course, pricing increases. The second piece of that is making sure that our value post first transaction is increasing. And so that again drives back to that point around repeat rate. So if we can make customers more valuable to us, that changes the economics of CAC to LTV ratio.
You used the buzzword ROAS. Many businesses leverage ROAS as one of their key metrics. Many businesses do not. They look at perhaps a marketing efficiency ratio, an MER. How do you think about the economics and the metrics in your business?
And I will say that the way I think about it at Quince and the way I've thought about it in other businesses I've been a part of is consistent. And I think you need to balance those two metrics that you framed up. So ROAS on one side and MER on another side. MER is a great way of assessing the incrementality of ROAS. And so often you'll see, especially if you're working with an agency, you'll see someone tell you that you're getting a fantastic ROAS, and then you'll look at the MER number and say, "Hey, this is getting pretty hot over time, and I'm getting concerned about are we actually seeing the sell through?" And so always want to make sure that there's an eye to the incrementality of that ROAS, and whether that's using an MTA model or some other measurement, you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on both. And typically, I like to have more of a rules-based approach of you want to spend up until a ROAS target, but then make sure you're also not exceeding a certain MER threshold.
The devil is in the details. You probably have heard that phrase time and time again in your professional life. Projects get started with great intentions, but you no longer have the time to pay attention to the little things that could make the difference between success and failure. At Details Interactive, you can discuss your business with a seasoned direct-to-consumer marketing executive who's helped launch and grow web businesses and integrate multi-channel marketing initiatives. Learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Listeners to the show know I like to talk about or I don't really like to talk about the A word, attribution. How are you thinking about, measurement, attribution? You're in so many different channels. How are you thinking about which are those channels are producing the revenue for you?
Yeah, so we, of course, do an MTA model, and it's always a hot topic of how do you tweak that model. But I think the most important thing is just experimentation and making constant adjustments and seeing where you're getting the performance, but then also really digging into the data to just understand from a merchandising perspective, are you seeing the development of your portfolio of products in the way that you would expect?
In a GM role within your business, I know you have full P&L, but are you responsible for driving the traffic, optimizing the traffic on the site, or is that a subject matter expert, centralized team that owns that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So everything at Quince is within the GM role is matrixed. And so that means you're always working with different functional groups. So specific to your question around marketing, that's a more of a centralized group. And then the GM role is to advocate for your department, figure out how you can line up the resources and help be a thought partner to them.
Is that a challenging environment? I've worked in matrixed environments and solid line environments. Do you find that to be challenging?
Absolutely. It's always a challenge, but it does facilitate a good bit of rigor. So if the organization is aligned on making data-driven decisions and making decisions based off of aligned heuristics for how we make those decisions, then it forces you to do the work to really analyze the data and then make a case for why we need to make changes.
You talk about, the value prop of the business. Consumers are, super incredibly value conscious. So does that play into the focus of your business?
Yeah, I think it's one critical piece of the value proposition to customers. But I will say we really try and lean into the product as the leading message when we talk about marketing and also when we think about the customer experience. So regardless of the price point, customers going to receive a package and they're going to use it every day. Hopefully they're going to use it for a really long time. We try and build products that are really durable and that are going to last for years. If the customer loves that product and has a great experience whenever they're using it, they're at a very high rate going to come back and purchase from Quince again. And so we let that flow through into the marketing. We try and lead with the materials, lead with the product itself. and then also have a message that, hey, it's an amazing price and way better than you can get in the market.
We can't talk in a show like this without speaking about artificial intelligence and perhaps how you might be using artificial intelligence in your business. Care to offer some insights there?
I will say it's about as an exciting time as I've been a part of from a technology perspective. I do think back on when I was in college and the App Store was out and everyone was developing apps and there was this whole ecosystem emerging. Feel the same level of excitement with these AI tools. And so I'd certainly encourage anyone that's listening to this to download Claude Code, download Codex from OpenAI and just experiment. When you have a problem that you would think about scoping out a tech project for, just try and do it yourself and see if you're able to get to the results you want. It's something that's very much been mandated from the top for Quince, and everyone in the organization is in these tools every single day and is thinking about how they can change the way that they work and really augment themselves with the tools. And so we are, as much as possible, trying to be an AI first company.
You can tell I've got a little gray hair, what I have left. So I've been at this for, a bit and, fully concur. I've been through the transition, to actually having email when we didn't have email,
That's
and we didn't have digital. But you're right. This is just an absolutely incredible time. The things that even I am doing and the way I start thinking, I actually was telling some folks, I actually never would have thought that I would have used AI to help me write an email. But I had a very technical email that I needed to get out. I went into ChatGPT. I prompted it a bit. It gave me an email that was, in 2 minutes, in 1 minute, far better than I could have ever written. I was able to edit it and make it, sound like it was my tone, and it was really incredible. It gave it to me, more quickly than I probably would have done it on my own, and more technically proficient. So agreed, and I do agree with the top-down approach. I think that we're all very busy. If you have your own personal curiosity, you might be doing some things, but having the top of an organization say, "Look, this is where we're heading. How are you going to use it to improve the business and improve your capacity?" It's really an important part. Agreed. Loyalty. Do you guys have a loyalty program?
We do to a small extent, but I would say it's a little bit underdeveloped. Obviously, when you leave reviews, there's a loyalty program through that. I think it's something that could, of course, be a great opportunity for us in the future.
Okay, interesting. So many brands, they check the box. We need to have a loyalty program, so they go off and they do something, but it's not really in the fabric of the business, which is interesting. Are you doing anything in the direct mail space? Who is your demographic, by the way?
I'll answer the second part first. So, as Quince gets a lot bigger, the demographics are, of course, going to change because you go from the early adopters to a much more broader scope of folks. But whenever we look to the demographic data, it's a very wide range. So, it bias a little bit more towards millennials, but we have a lot of Gen Z customers, and that's a great growth area for us. And we also have a lot of Gen X and baby boomer customers. On the direct mail question, it is something that we experiment with and we try and put a lot of data rigor to that. So the same as we do for our digital channels. It's one tool in the arsenal, but isn't one of the ones that we lead with first.
Got it. Really interesting business. You've got a great role there. You seem to have really enjoyed what you're doing there. You've got a nice career trajectory here and developing your family. So life is good for Michael Allan.
Well, thanks for saying that. And Mark and I were just chatting before this. I shared with him that I just had twin daughters, which is a very exciting thing for me and something I'm really looking forward to, that transition into being a father.
Yeah, I was trying to explain to Michael that twins that are 32 and twins that are newborn, it's still twins. It's an amazing experience, and you'll have a great time bringing them up. So good luck to you there. We're down to the end of the show, Michael. Really good information. Thanks for sharing. We do a 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. A brand that you admire or that inspires you.
So I love the brand Darn Tough Socks. They're made in Vermont. I love that it's a simple brand. I love that they execute on the product better than anyone else.
Favorite app on your phone?
I've been using the Brick app on my phone to try and use my phone less. And so anyone that's interested in taking a pause from their phone is needed, Brick is a great one to check out.
I think my wife might get that for me. The last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
I just bought a couple shirts from Taylor Stitch and had a great experience. Awesome brand.
Something that you're not good at, but wish that you were.
Multitasking.
I thought you were going to talk about guitar.
Oh, well, I'm bad at guitar. I'm even worse now.
Charitable organization that you're passionate about.
Well, I talked about the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I'll give them a plug again. And I'll also say anyone that's listening that probably is on the younger side, so more teenagers, if you're looking for a volunteer opportunity and can spare a week in the summer, it's a great opportunity to really develop yourself, but then also give back to some kids that really could use the help.
That's nice. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
I would love to be Dr. Dolittle and talk to animals.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
Definitely my passport. I've got a huge travel bug and have been fortunate enough to travel all over the world many times. And I certainly appreciate that more than anything else, that opportunity to experience different cultures.
Well, you'll have to get the carriers for the babies and strap them on, you and your wife, and you can continue that travel.
Absolutely. They're going to have to be global babies.
Michael, where can people reach out to you on social media should they be interested in doing so?
On LinkedIn, and it's Michael Allan, Allan.
Okay, great. Michael, this was great. Congratulations to you and your family, and continued good success at Quince.
Thanks very much, Mark. This was fun.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Michael Allan for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, the shift from strategy to execution is everything. It's one thing to analyze a business, but actually running one requires faster decisions, imperfect data, and the ability to align teams quickly. The best operators know how to bridge that gap. And number 2, data is only powerful if your organization knows how to use it. Michael talked about working in matrixed environments where influence matters just as much as insight. Being data-driven isn't just about the dashboards, it's about driving alignment and action. And number 3, great businesses are built on disciplined focus. Whether it's Quince's model of high-quality products at low prices or their emphasis on repeat customers over hype, winning brands stay clear on what they do best and execute relentlessly. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.